Hey folks, so this is the fun sheet for the advantages and disadvantages of asexual and sexual reproduction. Before we talk about those, we need to define asexual and sexual reproduction, give some examples of the organisms, and then talk about those advantages and disadvantages. So first, asexual reproduction is reproduction that occurs in organisms with just one parent. When this happens, it produces genetically identical offspring, and this is going to occur in simple organisms such as prokaryotes. I added daughter cells up here because a lot of times when it talks about the offspring, they call them daughter cells, and so I wanted to make a note that if you hear that word, it's talking about the offspring. The genetically identical offspring in this case. Okay, so that's the definition for asexual reproduction. Now we're going to give some examples. So first we have regeneration. That's the ability of an organism to grow new parts or regenerate, which is why we say it's regeneration. It's regenerating an entire body part, allowing it to reproduce asexually from severed parts. So an example is the starfish, and if we look at this example here, you can see it's showing like the right two arms got cut off, and on the top part, it's showing those two arms growing back. And then on the bottom part, it's showing the left three arms growing back from the two arms that were cut off. So it's regenerating and essentially making two brand new organisms, which is very similar to fragmentation, which is the next term. Fragmentation is a form of asexual reproduction where an organism breaks into pieces and each piece grows into a new organism. So you see over here on the right, you have this example is a planera. And it's a flatworm, essentially. It's showing you it's cutting it into three spots or into three pieces. And it's showing you that each piece grows a new organism. So you're getting three. This one. This one. And this one. All from one organism. Because each piece is growing a genetically identical copy of itself. The next example would be binary fission, which is a process in which single organism splits into two separate organisms. Basically, it's just dividing in half. Prokaryotes go through binary fission. Bacterias. Oopsie, went too fast. Hold on. Reverse. So in this picture, you see this is the cell starting off, the bacteria cell, and basically it's just dividing in half, and now you have two at the end. Okay. Next example is budding. A new organism develops as an outgrowth or bud, which is why it's called budding, from the parent organism. Eventually that bud is going to detach to become a new organism. So if we look at this hydra right here, you can see it starts to grow a bud. Eventually that bud detaches, and then a new organism grows from the original organism. Another example is yeast, and you can see up here. Oops, I went too far again. You can see up here, you have your original organism, it grows a bud and creates more genetically identical offspring. Next, we have runners. When an offshoot grows from the parent plant, you can see here this strawberry plant is growing this part right here. That's the runner. and it's going to grow a new daughter plant right next to it from the offshoot. Another example is spore formation, and its spores grow like on this underside of this leaf here to form new organisms. So you see all those little dots? Those are spores, and they create the new organism. Next, we have cloning, and that is an exact genetic replica of an organism. It involves creating an identical copy of an organism by using its DNA, and this is extremely complicated. It's done in a laboratory. It does not happen in nature. When they're making this form of cloning, it is complicated and done in a lab. Dolly was the first animal ever cloned in a lab, was the sheep, and it lived, this happened in 1996, so quite some time ago now, but it was a big deal back then when that occurred. Many animals have been cloned since. It's not real successful in the fact that the animals aren't living super long times. And there's lots of questions that go along with cloning. But anyways, that's a different day. Mitosis. When a cell divides, a single cell divides into genetically identical daughter cells. It is essential for growth, repair, and asexual reproduction in organisms. And it says repair, but I also want to add, you could call that healing. I'm going to have to erase that word because I'm about to write below here. But growth, repair, and healing. All right, so this is mitosis below, and it has these 6 phases. And the first phase is interphase, and then prophase, then anaphase, then metaphase, then anaphase, telophase, and cytokinesis. You're going to learn these phases, learn what they look like, and have to know them in order. So I just wanted to sort of give you a quick peek. All right, now we're going to move on to sexual reproduction. And sexual reproduction is different because asexual only takes one parent and sexual reproduction takes 2. It is more complex. Requires 2 parents to produce offspring that are not genetically identical to the parents, which results in the offspring having genetic variation, which is super important. Some flowering plants go through sexual reproduction, and all animals do. And, for example, humans do. You are genetic variation of your parents. You get half of your chromosomes from your mom and half from your dad, and that gives you variation. That's like the super main part and thing to know about sexual reproduction is the genetic variation and diversity. There's a couple ways that this can occur in sexual reproduction. So first you have fertilization, which is when a male gamete sperm cell and a female gamete egg cell join to make an offspring. Gamete is like the generic term for sex cells, and sperm and egg are the sex cells. So maybe we want to make a little note about that. So gamete equals, sex cells equals sperm and egg. you're going to need to know those terms and know that they all pretty much mean the same thing. All right, so then when we talk about flowering plants are the ones that can go through sexual reproduction, and only because it takes two. It has the pollen from the plant, and it's going to, from the male reproductive organs of the plant, flower, and it's going to be transferred to the female reproductive organs of the flower, which is the ovum or the egg. And that's going to produce a flower or fruit. Meiosis is the last type of sexual reproduction we're going to talk about. And this is the type of cell division that occurs in the formation of gametes, again, sex cells, reducing chromosomes number by half, resulting in genetic diversity. So it's sort of like mitosis, which you saw a couple slides ago, but here it's going to divide twice instead of one time, and you're going to start with 46, it's going to divide to 23, and so then you're going to get 23 from your mom and 23 from your dad, and so you're getting more diversity. All right, this is the part where we talk about the advantages and disadvantages of asexual and sexual reproduction and comparing them. It kind of gets a little squishy down here, so hopefully we can fit it all. First, we're going to talk about asexual reproduction. One parent is required. The genetic information is genetically identical to the parent. The advantages of this is that it's going to be less energy, and it's going to ensure survival, because if there's not a lot of the same species, it can reproduce without a mate. Disadvantages of this are that it's going to be more susceptible to genetic mutations, because it's not going to have variation. It's going to be very limited. And so if a mutation shows up, then it's going to be present in all of the offspring. The complexity of organisms that this occurs in is going to be simple-celled organisms like archaeobacteria and eubacteria. And if you remember, that means this is all prokaryotes. All right, and then we're going to talk about sexual reproduction. It has two parents. They produce genetically diverse offspring, which makes them unique. And this uniqueness helps protect organisms. It cuts down on mutations. It cuts down on defects. A disadvantage is also that it takes two organisms. And that means it's going to take more time, more energy, and more effort because of that. This occurs in complex organisms such as humans and animals, and you know that means that's going to be eukaryotes. Okay. If you have any questions, let us know.